And welcome everybody to another wonderful, nothing like a good book. And I got a ripper this time. I've always got rippers, I know, but this one is a little different. If you're into sci-fi, I tell you what, it's a debut novel by David Martorano, MD, and he explores the very essence of our existence. It's a post-apocalyptic tale, makes for a thrilling ride to a life of robot rule and beyond. And don't think that's stupid because it's not that far away, I'm telling you. And in fact, John Kelly from the Detroit Free Press, who I often quote, says, listen, this post-apocalyptic tale, makes for a thrilling ride to a life of robot rule and beyond. So look, if you're ready to be captivated by a thrilling journey into the future, dive into Immortality, Epolcalypse, a gripping page turner that transports you to not that far away, 2063. Now, the author is doctor and psychiatrist David Martorano, and he explores the deepest questions of the human soul and the ethical quandaries of eternal life in his debut fiction novel. Welcome, Doctor, or do I call you David?
David's great. Thanks, Mark.
All right. Well, you take readers on a hell of a journey here that will challenge their perception of life, death, and what it means to be truly human in this, in your debut fiction novel.
Well, thank you. I hope everybody enjoys the ride.
Readers, I think they'll be both, engulfed by the story and provoked into thought about a question that scientists, theologians, philosophers, storytellers, politicians, and freethinkers have asked for decades. Could artificial intelligence, as it keeps moving toward its full potential, evolve or destroy humanity? All right, now that is the question, and Chris Cordani is the host of Book Spectrum. He asks you that question. What do you think?
I think it's a definite possibility. I don't think it's going to go the way that people imagine it, in terms of, one of the things that I try to describe in this, Gandhi talks about it too. He says, I die each night and every morning I am reborn. If I replaced you and gave a new being all of your memories and they woke up the next day, they would believe they were you. But if you were gone, you wouldn't know you were gone per se, because you don't know what you don't know. And so the question about uploading your consciousness is, if I was able to create a computer and software and the process intelligent enough to understand exactly how your brain functions and to mimic those functions and to restore all of your memories into a machine, that machine might believe it was you, Mark. But you, Mark, if you had to die in the process, which in the book you do, you give up your life and you, Mark, the organic entity, cease to exist. Now, from a perspective of a soul, I don't believe that there is a transference of a soul. And I think that the religious would argue that therefore you don't exist because you are your soul. But if you are a summation of your thoughts, feelings, perspectives, and memories, then perhaps you do persist on this immortal plane. And I also explore the ideas, the religious concepts of heaven and eternal life as well, because that's a fairly vaguely sketched out area. Every religion has a different idea of what heaven is. Mm-hmm. And so in the future, what does it mean to be immortal? And that's asked from the opening pages of the book, which is a story. It's not, this isn't a lecture or a thesis on immortal life or what it means to be immortal. It is a story told from multiple perspectives of people experiencing the chaos that something like the ability to upload your consciousness will create in society, because there will be people harshly opposed to that because it's blasphemous from a Christian perspective. Offering something like that.
Well, the book is called Immortality, folks, Epolcalypse. It takes place in the aftermath of the apocalypse, where the futuristic colony of Babylon stands as an isolated utopia, and it's shielded by two powerful super AIs. Now, is this haven advanced technologies? In this haven, they are granted unparalleled luxuries, and the promise of immortality seems within reach for a select few. Okay, so how am I doing so far, David?
You're doing great.
I want to take an excerpt from the book because let's explain a little bit. Nick and his brother were heralds of a revolution. Quantum dots will change the planet, Nick promised his investors. Okay, so Nick is looking for investors to do things. Non-binary computers will do far more with way less. When the investors pushed back about competition from super-cooled qubits, Nick predicted qubits will never leave the lab. And he went on to explain qubits are too costly and not scalable. The message proved digestible for a handful of investors. So within a month, investors were climbing over each other to acquire the smallest stake in the newly formed Santos Corporation. Okay, who is Santos? Who runs that?
So Nick, Cynthia, and John are three siblings who all attended MIT. And the bit you're reading from is actually present day, basically. It's the year 2025. And all of this is real. There are these zinc dot processors that are capable of multi-state computing. We haven't really nailed down, and they're capable of doing it at room temperature. When I'm talking about this other part of supercooled qubits, most of the quantum computers right now that IBM has and that are being, experimented with around the world require a huge amount of infrastructure just to run a small computer, because you need to have liquid helium or liquid oxygen to keep these things cool. You need to have a giant amount of space. That the computer itself is small, but everything to make the computer run is huge. So it's kind of like the ENIAC of 80 years ago, this room-filling computer that does very little for the amount of space and energy it consumes. So the breakthrough that I think computer science is looking for is this idea of being able to do it without all of the cooling efforts. So to be able to do multi-state computing, which is what this is about, and it's a very small part of the novel. The purpose of that prologue is to help people understand that this isn't science fantasy. It isn't the transporters of Star Trek. This is around the corner for us as a society, that computers are going to have an amazing leap in processing ability that's going to change as computers are smart enough to take advantage of this change.
Okay. Well, we know that the futuristic colony is Babylon, and it stands as an isolated utopia. But beyond Babylon's borders, and this is interesting, the new Amish, a deeply spiritual community, have renounced all technology. Now, they're devoted to eradicating what they see as the abominations of Babylon, which they believe defy nature and the divine. And now at the center of this conflict is Martin, the world's first super AI. And decades after Martin unleashed the Epolcalypse, nearly bringing humanity to extinction, the new Amish face a dire choice. So it's to them to form an unholy alliance with the AI and combat technology with technology. Fancy that. What a decision to have to make, eh, Doug?
Yes, absolutely. And so very soon after the prologue that you were just reading from, the book jumps into the past of a cell phone engineer and her life journey that eventually ends up with her living in the United States and under very different circumstances. But it follows the upheaval that I believe that automation is on the precipice of creating. So I feel like in the next few years, there's going to be a tremendous amount of working class unrest as more and more jobs are automated more quickly than people can develop new skills to get new paying jobs.
Right. Well, it's already happening, isn't it, with AI?
Yeah, it's happening. Yeah. And so, Chat GPT, which I now use at work on a regular basis, was just fantasy stuff a few years ago. And now you can ask Chat GPT to write computer code. I have. I've asked it to write Python programs and tested them, and they work. And it writes it in 1 second, literally 1 second. You can ask Chat GPT to write a program. You can ask it to draw you a picture of something you've never seen before. You can ask it to plan your trip. You can ask it to write legal pleadings for filings with the courts.
Yeah, pretty amazing. But there are others, aren't they? ChatGPT is not getting a wonderful rap, basically, compared to a few others out there that are supposed to be better. What's your thoughts on that?
So I mean, I've played with Gemini a bit so far, and I think Gemini has got some amazing, abilities. One of the ones I'm very concerned about, and I actually wrote an article about this very recently, was about Apple Intelligence, because its tight integration with the hardware is exactly what I described in the book. So I talk about the idea of you're giving all of this information to the internet, basically, if we want to just call it that,
Right.
for lack of a better word, the ether, um, about yourself, about your personal relationships, about everything. And we make assumptions about privacy that are on a daily basis disproven. Information breaches. You find out that ChatGPT very recently was still transferring data with no encryption at all, just out in the internet. And so all of these assumptions that we like to have about Face ID protecting your identity and your privacy, it protects it today, but does it protect it tomorrow? Does it protect it 5 years from now? What about all the old information about you? I always talk about teenagers and kids who do stupid stuff all the time. I run a psychiatric hospital, and so I have kids who are constantly sending naked pictures of themselves. I'm 54 years old. I never gave anybody in my teen years a naked picture of myself because there was no way to do that when you and I were children. I'm assuming you're somewhere a contemporary of mine. That did not happen. And now people are making poor choices that have lifelong consequences that they don't even recognize.
See, we never had any of that, did we? And now that we've got all this social media stuff, I mean, I can understand those that absolutely hate it, what it's brought upon our society. But then again, I mean, I want to mention that Grady Hub, he's a top Amazon Hall of Fame reviewer, pretty well respected, 5 stars, a completely captivating epic saga. It's an invitation to consider all possibilities of AI. The book is brilliant. You do state that this is not a book about God. It is not a book about atheism either. So what is it?
It's, as I say right after that, it's a cautionary tale, because we can't imagine what the world's going to look like in 2063. But I find it difficult to imagine what the world will look like in 2035. I have this vision that I'm trying to share because we don't know what the future holds for us. How do humans maintain their relevance? How do we properly govern how we use and implement artificial intelligence without making ourselves obsolete and irrelevant?
Sit on the chair and call for the robot on the couch, right?
Exactly.
I mean, you see all these movies of apocalypse and what happens afterwards, and it's controlled by machines. I mean, one would think that someone's been in the future, seen all of this, and that's what they're writing about, as with Star Trek,
Yeah.
And go on. Mm-hmm.
No. What I was going to say is, so this idea of these super AIs that are running Babylon, they are actually the immortalized versions of Cynthia and John, these two Santos siblings.
Right.
So Cynthia runs in some unfortunate circumstances and can't go on in organic form, and she's the first one uploaded. But then they call them giants, begin to help everybody solve all of their problems. But the giants are living in such a rapid lifespan. They're living thousands of lives every day, and then hundreds of thousands of lives every day because of how accelerated everything is. And humans become boring to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
And they meet all of our needs, but the reason they're meeting our needs is so that we'll keep making them more memory and creating more energy for them to do more processing so they can live in this world they live in. But they don't really have a connection even to their still living brother, John. And they hide that from the people in Babylon. They want to still appear human, but it's an artifice. It's not real. It's not who they really are. And so that's a small part of the story. But the concept of, if all of a sudden I'm living thousands of lives a day, while you and I are carrying on this conversation, I've lived multiple days in my mind, was the beginning of the conversation really connected to you? And when you get to this immortal plane, I have children, I have a wife, I have friends who I really value because they occupy huge portions of the time that I give to those relationships. Now imagine if they were only a microscopic fraction, and if you live infinitely and you're living these amazingly fast lives, what relevance does one human life have to you? No matter how much it mattered before, how quickly is it supplanted by an infinite number of variations of that life?
Sounds like I lost you going out into space there. Apocalypse delves into the clash between technological progress and spiritual conviction, right? So, how did you approach balancing these two themes?
So, for me, again, I think we all fear death on some level. And spirituality offers you an answer that you can just put on a shelf. I will go on. God's worked all this out for me, and that's great. And then for people who don't believe, they're stuck with, well, I would like to persist in some way. And some people have achieved immortality in a variety of other ways, right? Through each chapter begins with a quote of a famous person. And it relates to the text of the chapter, but it also is a different form of immortality. Their works, their contributions made them immortal. When I said Gandhi a few minutes ago, Gandhi is immortal. Gandhi still lives in our daily life, right? You think about if somebody brings up Gandhi with you, it cues certain emotions still, even though you never met him. I never met him, but a fantastic human being who had great ideas about nonviolence and, about kind of passive resistance to authority, fantastic thoughts that persist in the modern world. So the way that I divide the groups in the book are that the nons, the atheists, they're called nons by the New Amish because they're non-believers, and in many ways they don't matter.
Well, touching on the New Amish, the New Amish community in your book rejects technology, while the futuristic colony of Babylon embraces it. So, what inspired you to create such contrasting worlds?
Well, that's the idea of the apocalypse. So, this computer Martin causes the apocalypse, and I can't get into all the reasons why he did, or it will ruin the story. So I won't tell you that part. But we know from early on that Martin is largely responsible for the events of the apocalypse. But the apocalypse is not the kind of robot war or people using missiles against each other. It's much more of a social chaos and a disruption of the fabric of society created through imitation and understanding what each individual's weaknesses are. So Martin understands your frailties because he's got all this data from these cell phone company records and the chat GPTs and all these other sources. And he is able to create a devastating social profile for every single person on Earth. And he interrupts currencies and he interrupts electricity and he interrupts other things. But that isn't the major form of chaos. The major form of chaos is a destruction of trust. Our society in the long run runs on trust.
Totally. So the concept of AI evolving or destroying humanity is really central to the story, isn't it? I mean, what message do you hope readers can take away from this exploration?
Well, I think everybody's takeaway is going to hopefully be different, because I hate literature that forces a viewpoint on people. What I've tried to create here is a laboratory for people to explore what may happen and how they would want things to be differently, to begin to open the dialogue as a society. I don't have the answers for us. I don't. I wish I did. What I have is a vision of the future that I'm trying to share to help people decide, is that the future I want? Is that the future I want to live in? Is that the future I want to help create? Or do I want to work as a society to change this now before it's too late?
Well, here's the deal. As a psychiatrist, I mean, we're talking the future, okay? Do you think you'll be needed?
So I've also been a medical professor for many years, and I work a lot with third-year medical students, and I have talked to them a lot about how the only thing that future-proofs your life is a pattern of aggressive lifelong learning. And it doesn't matter whether you're a psychiatrist or whether you're a surgeon or whether you're a carpenter or a plumber. I had an uncle who was a film editor who did film the actual cutting of film. And when video came out, he refused to learn how to edit on computers or video. And very shortly afterwards, he was driving a taxi.
There you go. There you go. Look, as a psychiatrist, then let me ask you this. How did your background influence your portrayal of consciousness and the human spirit in this first taboo book of yours, Immortality, Epolcalypse?
So there's a wonderful part of the book where they're forced to go to understand and to find something. I'm not going to say what they're looking for, but they're looking for a specific fact. And they go into John's consciousness. And in that, they've created a browser for looking at consciousness to understand and create a semantic representation of the different parts of consciousness. And these are talks that I've given hundreds of times in different places that I pulled into the story to explain how I view consciousness evolving inside our brain. So how our mind actually is overlaid on a bunch of neurons. And it also talks to this immortalization process. However, it hopefully when the reader is exploring this, and again, it's not done with lazy exposition. I really tried to create meaningful scenes where it's happening. I don't just write for pages about, oh, and then of course there's this. Mm-hmm. But the characters have interactions in different places at different times. And I'm hoping at the end, the reader experiences this as knowing something they didn't know before about how they work.
Well, David, you've described your book as a cautionary tale. What specific warnings or lessons do you want readers to consider?
I want everybody to consider that if you're not actively adapting and preparing for the wonderful gifts that technology will bring us, you will be used and thrown away by the people who do. And if you don't use them responsibly, you're part of the problem.
All right.
So it's both of those things.
Well, you would see, copious amounts of various issues with people. Are you getting more and more concerned about their jobs, their future, AI coming, this whole genre of we're going to be living in a different world? Is that already raising its head?
Yes, it is already raising its head. I actually worked, so I'll tell you a brief, I ran a technology outsourcing company in the 2000s to India. And in the time I worked, we were actually, it was while the U.S. economy, right before we had the big financial crisis of 2008.
All right.
And so attorneys in the United States were making $40 an hour and attorneys in India were making $2 an hour. And we were able to adjust how we were able to give work through computer software and things to workers in India and make money off the differential for law firms. They would have these attorneys in large class action lawsuits processing millions of documents. The computers would do part of the work and then the Indian attorneys would verify it. And then it would be raised up at a higher level to expensive American attorneys. But what happened was the financial crisis came. Attorney salaries in the United States went as low. You could hire an attorney in Detroit for $20 an hour. And in the meantime, the attorney salaries in India went up to $12 an hour. And as a result, there was no longer any benefit financially to outsourcing the type of work we were doing for that small differential and for the differences in the U.S. attorney quality. What I'm saying about that is it can happen very quickly. That happened over a 2.5-year period. The Indian salaries went up 7-fold and the American salaries dropped by 50%. So market fluctuations based on demand and skills and technologies can rapidly change things. And I've seen it happen. And I saw it happen to these Indian attorneys. They were so excited about their 700% salary increases. And then a year later, they were getting laid off.
You're right. Right. Well, the promise of immortality, right? I mean, let's face it, it's tantalizing, right? How did you approach
Not to me anymore.
Not to you anymore?
I have to tell you that after this book, I don't want it.
There you go.
And I do not want immortality. I do not want to live forever. I don't want to consign my children to the smallest fraction of my own memory and life.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've got to go back and look at the blueprints and start another one somewhere. So how did you approach depicting the allure and potential consequences of eternal life then? Because if you think like that, how did you write?
Well, so I told the story. I tried to get into each set of characters' heads. My job as a psychiatrist isn't to always put my viewpoint forward. It is to imagine from inside the people I'm working with, from their perspective, an empathetic drive to understand where they're at.
So in a world
So
then where AI rules, what challenges do you envision for humanity beyond mere survival if it comes to that?
I think that relevance and feeling meaning is the single biggest thing. When you look at why people leave jobs, why people want change, everybody wants a sense of meaning. And I think in the short run, augmented reality, games like Minecraft, I had a discussion with my children once where they told me, Dad, why do you build a nice house when you could just play Minecraft and have a great house in there? My daughter was 11 when she said that to me. And and the thing is, to her, there was such a little line between the reality of a house with a nice kitchen and and the ease of building a nice kitchen in Minecraft that the reality that you can't cook your food in Minecraft didn't really fully impact her. And she would rather have had a mansion in Minecraft that she could make in an hour than bother to get an education and work through all that to eventually afford a nice kitchen that was constructed of, wood and stone.
Dr. David Martorano, you've worn many hats: futurist, inventor, artist, even. How did these diverse roles shape your storytelling?
I tried to imagine the life I imagine I'd love to lead today. In If I could have everything I wanted, I put that into Babylon. And the life in Babylon that I created is one where it's not like you're not hovering around and flying everywhere. There's beautiful trails to walk down. And there's a beautiful ocean like terrarium that you can go and enjoy a day at the beach or have a great meal at. You get to spend time with your friends. You get to explore the arts. The people are creating art within the community and sharing it with each other. That's my idea of a utopia.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the world that I created. And things are decided largely democratically, but people have to know and be informed about the choices they're making. They can't just check boxes to vote and not understand the topic. It's incumbent upon every person there to know what they're voting for. It's not just Republican or Democrat. So there's a lot of that. I look at the challenges of our legal system.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things, isn't there?
There are. Unfortunately, I do have to go. I wish I didn't. I would love to keep talking. Maybe
well, I was going to ask you, what's next for you? Can we expect more, thought-provoking novels? This is pretty off the wall, Immortality, Epolcalypse. Wow. For a first book, I got to tell you.
Well, thank you. So yes, there are sequels in the works already, and they very much build on the stories in this. And I didn't tell the whole story in the first book, but I tell a story, and the story finishes. Well, it's a standalone work. However, if people are interested in these types of explorations of our future, there are sequels in the works.
All right. Well, in closing, apart from your site, immortalitythenovel.com, people can buy that directly, I take it, off that. Buy the book off that site. Where else can it be bought?
It's on Amazon. It's on Amazon. It'll be on Audible. The audiobook comes out in 2 weeks. It was recorded by a really great narrator, Dan Davis, who's a Hollywood actor, has done a bunch of great books. We had Grammy Award-winning producers on it. So it's going to be a really exciting way to listen to the novel.
Fantastic.
It's a fully unabridged work. So it'll be on Audible around August 15th if all things go well.
Well, all the extreme and very best you can possibly get out of this with it. Good luck, because it's a challenge. What you've written is quite unique, and it's I think it takes guts, to be honest with you, to write something like this and keep people interested. I really do, because it's way out there. But it's got a great story, and it's captivating exploration of the human spirit, isn't it, really?
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time. You have a wonderful day.
Okay, and, you too.
Happy reading. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Dr. Martorano's novel, Deepest Questions of Existence and the Moral Dilemmas of Eternal Life. The clash between technological progress and spiritual conviction escalates. The quest to define immortality, divinity, and the essence of humanity is intertwined with the mysterious nature of consciousness. If that's not enough to blow your brains, I don't know what is. John Kelly says it's a profound look into humanity and the very real future that we could be facing. Scary stuff. A compelling, frightening look into the future as AI rules the world and determines outcomes. Immortality is the name of the book. Immortality, Epolcalypse. And it delves into the inherent conflict between seeking eternal life through the use of machines and trying to live without them. So it's a post-apocalyptic tale, and it makes for a thrilling ride to a life of robot rule and beyond. So there you have it, then you know where to get it. Hope you enjoyed that one. We'll be back with another Nothing Like a Good Book fairly soon.